Most people who know pretty much anything about economics dislike the minimum wage for a very good reason. The supply and demand law. It's basically the first thing you learn in Econ 101 is supply and demand because it applies universally everywhere. When the price goes up, the demand goes down. On top of that, when the price goes up, the supply goes up. So what ends up happening when the government sets a minimum wage is that the price of unskilled labor is set higher, so therefore the demand for unskilled labor goes down. So you have this gap where there's these unemployed unskilled laborers, plus when you make it more enticing for unskilled laborers to get jobs at, say, whatever minimum wage is, $7.25 an hour in federal in the United States, because it's more enticing at $7.25 an hour than, say, $6 an hour, that increases the demand for those jobs. And meanwhile, the supply of those jobs has gone down. The unskilled laborer's biggest asset is his willingness to work for less than the skilled laborer. If you have a choice between hiring Bill Gates at $10 an hour or some high school kid at $10 an hour, you're going to hire Bill Gates, aren't you? But Bill Gates is going to demand a lot more than $10 an hour, and the high school kid is going to demand a lot less than $10 an hour. So there's where the high school kid's advantage is. He can get the job, Bill Gates can't. Now, when the minimum wage is raised, say, from $7.25 to $10 an hour or something like that, the people who were previously employed at $7.25 an hour, they'll likely get pink slips, so the employers can hire the more skilled $10 an hour laborers. Believe it or not, the minimum wage was originally advocated by unions because the unions got paid much higher wages than the plebes. So the plebes actually had a comparative advantage against union workers in that they would demand less money. So the minimum wage, what's the word? Widen, shorten. The minimum wage shrinks that gap between the unskilled laborers and the union labor, which makes the union labor a lot more attractive. So that's why the unions originally favored the minimum wage, because they could get rid of the unskilled laborers, the immigrant workers, and a lot of the minority workers in favor of their union workers. Look at it this way: if oranges cost $1.50, and tangerines cost $2, you're likely to buy an orange over a tangerine. But when the government forces the price of oranges up to $2.50, well, you're likely to buy a tangerine. And the analogy here is that the tangerines are the slightly more highly skilled workers, and the oranges are the lower skilled workers. So the comparative advantage that the lower skilled workers once had is gone when you raise the minimum wage, so nobody hires them. And you might say, oh, Callan, it's not fair to compare workers to fruit. Well, you know what? The laws of economics are the same as the laws of physics. It doesn't matter how you feel, they apply universally. It doesn't matter how you feel about gravity. When you walk off the cliff, you're going to fall to your death. And the fact is, the government jacking up the price of unskilled labor reduces the demand for that unskilled labor and creates unemployment. So it is a bad idea. Now, there are lots of unskilled laborers that would have been skilled by now if they had gotten a job, but they can't get a job because the minimum wage is set too high. And that is a problem. The minimum wage doesn't force employers to pay employees more. What it does is force all of the unskilled laborers out of the job market. Let me give you another example. There are lots of internships out there that would pay, but the government says that the employers aren't allowed to pay. Say you want to work for a company, you want to just learn on the job. That's your primary focus, but you need to get paid something. They need to compensate you somehow for your time. So you say, you know what? Why don't you pay me just like $3 an hour, and we'll call it square. And the employer says, yeah, $3 an hour. That's perfect. We'll pay you $3 an hour. But then the government steps in and they say, no, you are not allowed to pay him $3 an hour. You can pay him $7.25 plus Social Security, Medicare, unemployment insurance. You can pay him that, but you're not allowed to pay him $3 an hour. Even though both parties agreed to it, the government steps in and says, no, you're not allowed to do that. So guess what? The intern gets paid nothing. But anyway, the people who oppose the minimum wage don't do so because they hate poor people. They do so because they know that the minimum wage hurts the poor people the most. Skilled laborers don't have to worry about the minimum wage because they already get paid more than the minimum wage. The minimum wage only applies to 2% of the full-time workforce in America. So all the government is doing is cutting off the bottom rungs of the job ladder. They're not raising anybody's wages. Maybe there are a couple here and there, but overall, all it's doing is hurting the very people it's meant to help.